So I'm happy to see everybody. And I
Yeah.
definitely wanted to start out saying another huge thank you, Valerie Taylor, for the wonderful personal connection that you gave with the book club while I've been away. It's so special. And I'm grateful and honored to see all the wonderful posts that you guys have been doing and conversations while I've been away. So thank you so much. It really means a lot.
Well, I'd like to say my pleasure, but under the circumstances, it's not about pleasure. It's about friendship.
I appreciate
It was something that I, every couple of days I had my to-do list, and it was always at the top, Heather post, so
Thank
I'm glad that I was able to keep it going. And I would like to, I have this whole stack of emails that you and I have had back and forth over the last couple of months. And I found one this morning, like at the very bottom of the pile. And it's dated March 22nd, which is my daughter's birthday. And I'm one of these people who kind of believes in coincidences. And I think you all have read the book, so it's a lot of coincidences in the book. But that was the day that you and I, Heather, connected, was on my daughter's birthday. And you had won a signed book from another book club online. And so I thought that was quite a coincidence. And then
It's funny you mentioned that because I have the letter from you.
Oh
that I
dear.
brought. Yes. And I was going to read it. And I actually, just a little excerpt, because you had sent it to me. I'm so excited to send you What's Not Said, which you recently won through the giveaway sponsored by Tattered Pages Book Club, which was awesome. That's where I first got to learn about you and your work. It was their big like celebration anniversary bash, which was it was kind of like a giant author takeover. It was amazing. It was so fun. And you had said in your letter, this is when I was starting to think, should I make a book club? I had this idea spinning around. I was like, oh, maybe I will. Maybe I don't know if I'd be good at it. And you have the paragraph in here that you've challenged yourself to talk with 21 book clubs by the end of 2021. And at this point, you had scheduled 9. And you said, if you belong to a book club, you'll see there's a discussion guide at the back of the book. I'd be honored to do a virtual discussion with your group. And I was reading and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to start sending people messages. I'm going to start a book club. It felt like a sign.
Well, you're very brave.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, YouTube and online is a scary place, but I think I'm starting to learn it and maneuver a little. And I'm having fun with it. So.
Oh, and here's Stephanie.
Oh, hi, Stephanie. I'll say hi again when it looks like your audio is connected. But I had wanted to ask you, so at that point, you had talked to 9 book clubs. What have you done of your goal so far? Are you higher up on that 21 list?
I've stopped counting, but it's only maybe 11 or 12. And it's hard. And so it's really interesting. And I don't know if you all are finding this, is that now that the pandemic is kind of lifting a bit, book clubs are that had gone virtual are now coming back in person. In fact, I did my first in-person book club discussion a week ago Monday, which was a lot of fun. And so for we authors who, released a book during 2020, and shifted everything to be online, and now we're kind of saying, so what are we online or are we in person? And I think the online allows us to do things like this, right? The in person, for me anyway, is that it needs to be local.
Yes.
And I know a lot of authors are free to travel and love to travel, and so they'll go anywhere to meet with anyone. And so I'm, like I said, I did one in person. But so I would just say to all of you wonderful ladies online this morning and those that are watching that, If you belong to another book club besides Heather's wonderful foray into all of this, I would love to do a virtual meeting, with your group, with what's not said, or then eventually what's not true. So please reach out to me, and I would be glad to do that.
That's
So,
fantastic. I hope you get some more
yeah.
people reaching out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like, and your book is perfect for a book club. I
Book
love that
clubs
you set it up
seem
for
to love it.
discussion. Yeah, it's great. I like I was telling you earlier, I had to edit out questions and comments because I'm like,
Yeah.
you'll be here forever. There's so many wonderful things I want to ask about and talk about.
And I want to hear from everyone on the call today too.
Yes, anytime you guys want to jump in with questions or comments, please do. We're excited to have you here.
Hi, Heather. I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, not a problem.
No.
We have it set up so people can jump in and at any time and just kind of join in on the fun whenever your schedule allows. So
I had trouble connecting, so
Oh dear.
oh, yeah, you never tech issues, right? That's one thing. I love the virtual where we can all be from anywhere in the world and do this, but I know tech issues are always a factor somewhere.
oh yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not very tech savvy, so
Me neither.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Everything I'm doing, I'm learning as I'm going, and I'm crossing my fingers and researching.
I did this one time before, and the kind of the same things happened. So I just remember I had to unmute everything. So
Oh, yes. Well, I'm glad you're here. And I definitely will love to hear from you guys. If you have questions, I know my very first question I wanted to start off with asking about, I was curious as I was reading, there were so many topics that were brought up, even if there were just mention of it. I was wondering if you kind of did a lot of research on these topics, if they were an interest to you, that you were looking into them further. Stuff like even little things, like when they're mentioning the videos online that they were looking how to get back at Bill for cheating on Nancy, and
yeah.
or big things too, like Venice sinking. I know it was just a brief mention, but I don't know. I stopped reading and I started looking stuff up. There were things that I'm like, I wonder if she was researching too, which I know you've been to Venice, so you know firsthand too, but. And even chronic kidney disease. I mean, there was a lot mentioned in there, which I'm sure took a lot of research. So what was your process like? Was that a lot of your writing process?
So I think your three examples are quite varied and unique, right? So I'll just start with the big one, which was the chronic kidney disease. I knew that I wanted Mike to have a serious illness that wouldn't necessarily, kill him outright. And so I think I must have been watching some TV show or something where kidney disease was, the topic. And so I did start researching it. And I realized certainly that it's a very serious illness that I at that time really didn't know anyone with it. And I could have, done some outreach to talk with people, but I decided that, it was going to be his illness, but I wanted and I needed to touch on it, but I didn't want it to be what really drove the story. Because what I wanted to drive the story really was the relationship between the two, the husband and wife. And so the way that I put it in the book was, where she Googled the information. And I literally, word for word took it offline and set it up that way. And I'll be very honest with you that I did have one reviewer who slammed me for that she said I knew nothing about chronic kidney disease and how serious it is, and she didn't like the way that I treated it. And obviously there was, she must have some experience with it. And so I totally respect that. On the other hand, I now have a really good friend whose husband has chronic kidney disease, and she thought I handled it swell. So, you know, you're going to have both ends of it. So,
I'm a nurse.
You know,
I'm a nurse, Valerie, and I think you handled it just fine for the book. You didn't go too deep into it, but what you covered was very good. I mean, you left everybody know what they needed to know, and nothing wasn't untrue.
right.
Yes, it can be less serious or even more serious, but
Right.
you didn't go that far. It was enough for a book for the reader to get the gist of what was going on. No, I thought you handled it great.
Oh, thank you for that.
I really do. I
for
was,
what you do, being a nurse. That's amazing. I know you've had some difficult, crazy times, I'm sure, with how the world has been. So I want to say thank you for being a nurse and all that you do. That is amazing.
I'm retired at the moment, but I would love to go back. I really would, but maybe not now. But
yeah,
I worked in an ICU my whole career, so
dear.
I mean, I seen the end stage of kidney disease, and yes, it can be, you know, but I think for what you were trying to show and prove, you did a great job. The book was awesome. The book was awesome. I can't wait for the next one.
Oh, I know. I'm excited too. When I was reading it, I didn't know anything about it either. And I think you did a great job. What you did explain, it felt very realistic when I read it. Like it made, like it flowed in a way that it seemed like it could be a real thing. And it did seem a little bit like, you know, every case would probably be very personalized and different.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think you're right.
Exactly. For a generalized topic or generalized explanation, or how I think he handled it, you know, his character handled it fine too, you know, but
I'd like to say one thing myself. I've known several people who have had this. Actually, one fellow I know about 3 years ago passed away from it. And I like the fact that, you know, the idea of the covering that Mike had, and the denial and stuff like that, and not wanting to follow the diet, not wanting to make changes in the life, to just think, well, you know, I'm going to be able to handle this without making a lot of changes. I mean, that just really echoed the thing that the three guys that had serious disease. And I used to think that I was fated, because it seemed like almost all the guys I met ended up with this thing. So,
I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I would, so another topic that you didn't mention, Heather, that is kind of a theme throughout the book, is emotional abuse. And I didn't start out writing the book about that topic. And I didn't realize until after, you know, the manuscript was written, and I probably edited it a few times, and I was sitting and I, you know, read through the whole manuscript, and all of a sudden, I think I was reading it with the idea of, okay, somebody's going to ask me what the theme of the book is, okay, and it kind of just jumped out at me, and so I'm not really trying to give you too much information, but you know, I do have that in my history and my experience, and so, and I didn't have to do research on it, and but when I was writing different scenes or different passages, dialogue that show the abuse or even the physical abuse with her stepfather, I tried to get to a line and stop. I didn't want to, especially with the physical abuse, to go past a certain point, because I didn't, you never know who's reading your book, and you don't know what's going to be a trigger for someone, like the reviewer who said that I didn't know what I was talking about. I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to emotional and physical abuse, but I respect my readers that, you know, and even my family, you know, that I didn't want to reveal too much that was going to upset people. On the flip side, I did the chapter that I kept in that I wasn't sure about was the one with her mother, Patty Cake O'Callahan. And the whole intro to that chapter about her mother, you know, her parents coming over from Ireland, and you know, them having her during a snowstorm in Boston. Well, I actually did research that from the standpoint that that March that Patricia would have been born, there was a major snowstorm in Boston that shut everything down. So that was an enjoyable piece of research. And I had debated whether or not, you know, because the book is 81,000 words, and that's typical for a novel. In fact, What's Not True is 85,000 words. But I thought if I was going to remove any chapter, that could have been one, but then I would have had to do something else to explain how Patricia was knowledgeable of Michael's deceits. And so I decided to leave it in, and people tend to like that chapter. So
yeah, and I really respect too what you're saying before, that you were really writing trying to be mindful of what could be a trigger for people. And it makes me wonder, I was kind of wondering, if you would ever see yourself writing something in the future more from the point of view of Cassie's mother, or Cassie's best friend, even like kind of a side character with their own story. But it made me wonder just now listening to what you're saying, would you be more afraid of having to avoid triggers with like her mother's story?
Well, you know, that's an interesting thought about, you know, because I'm almost in the middle of book 3, and I'm having some struggle, you know, because when you're with these characters for so many years now, you don't want it to be boring, you know, to your readers. So I'm trying to see what I can do to pump it up, and so that expanding those relationships might help. I did have early on in one of my book club meetings where one of the members said that she would have enjoyed knowing more about the relationship between Cassie and Annie, the friend. Okay. And I've noticed since then in books that I read, or even, you know, TV shows or movies, that there's often, whether it be for the male lead or the female lead, a friend relationship that helps move the story along. So I think that that's a vehicle or technique that writers use. And so in book 2, What's Not True, Annie is still in it, but she probably plays the same role and is there, but I may have to expand her in book 3. So
Yeah, like you were saying, I think people would love that. I love knowing the more behind like the other characters and their relationships with things like that that we follow along. So that'd be great. I had also wanted to ask you, you put a lot of your own personal interests into this, you know, like Tai Chi and Red Sox, and Cassie has those interests and hobbies. And you mentioned some really specific ones. One of them was like volunteering at a local PBS station during their
Mhm.
telethons. Are these things that are also part of your life or interests or something you'd like to do?
I did, yes. I lived in Boston for a while in the early 2000s, and I did volunteer at the PBS station on a telethon, which was a lot of fun. If you ever get a chance to do that, I would certainly encourage it. I think trying to think that there were a few others there, and I don't know if it's in book 1 or book 2, but there's where she wants to volunteer. I think it's book 2. Doesn't matter. To volunteer with a kind of a not adoption, but a foster child center. And I didn't do that, but I have experience with that. So yeah, I did bring in. It's easy to do that when you're a writer.
That. And it's kind of cool to
Yeah,
know the behind the scenes that it is something that
yeah,
you've
yeah,
done and an interest in it. It's really
yeah,
cool that you,
yeah,
you share that with
yeah,
your character and then you get to kind of share it with all of us. I
yeah.
love that. I think that's really neat.
So it's either things, so I'm thinking of some other little things in there. So there were either things that I have experience with or my friends have experience with, you know, so, and I did that on a couple of things where, like the name Annie is, I have a friend for like 50 years and her name is Anne. Well, her name's Anne, I call her Annie. And another really good friend of mine, her last name is McCarthy. And so there's, you know, the officer McCarthy and, you know, Cecilia, the college girl, my granddaughter's name is Cecilia. So there were kind of nods and acknowledgement to, you know, people in my life that way.
I love that. And you
Yeah.
also gave some nods to a lot of really like big quotes too. Is that something that you had gone into doing that on purpose, or is that something that kind of came to you as you went?
I think that it was kind of a pull and a push type of thing because when I was writing and there's you know, I go down this path of, you know, the transcendentalists, and maybe I was doing some reading about them at the time or research or whatever, and I got really interested in Emily Dickinson and found you know, a quote, you know, something like, you know, sometimes saying nothing is really saying a lot, you know, type of thing. And
I'll be
I
right back.
okay. So I researched, you know, and I found that. And what's interesting, I don't know if what experience you all have had with quote writing, including quotes from other people. And there's, you know, you've got to be really careful about what's in the public domain. And there's, you know, term limits and everything surrounding it. And what I found with Emily Dickinson is that there are a few things that are in public domain, but some things that are not. And of course, the quote, I went to the library when they were open and, you know, did research there and discovered that I had to write, I think it was to the Harvard University Press has rights to her quotes, to her books, to her quotes, her poems and everything. So I wrote to them and asked for permission, and they very nicely gave me permission. And I think I've got that acknowledgement in the back of the book to that. But then there was another quote, and I don't know if it was Robert Louis Stevenson or somebody, but that was in the domain, a public domain. So I was able to use that. Now in the next
more
book,
research that you had to do just to see what
in
you
the next book, I went a little crazy because I found so for this, the second book, I went looking for quotes, all right, and about truths and lies, right? And I found a bazillion of them. And what I have at the beginning of the second book, I actually have 4 quotes, and I just couldn't choose one. So I included them all, and there's kind of a progression. One is from Aldous Huxley, another is from Henry David Thoreau, another one is from Soren Kierkegaard, and the last one is from Elvis Presley. And so it's and my publisher didn't want me to include the one on Elvis Presley, and I was like, you've got to be kidding. That's kind of my writing style. I mean, that I can be very serious about something, and then there's the kind of the humorous or snarky remark. Okay, I mean, that's who I am, and that's how I write. And so I pushed back and I said, no, absolutely, the Elvis Presley quote has to stay in there. So
I love that. And I love that you kept the whole theme of quotes going as part of your
Right.
writing.
Yeah.
Too.
Yes.
I think that's really neat.
But I didn't overdo it. I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
But
It's
there
hard
are
to-
some zingers. There were some good ones.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick with quotes.
I think Michelle has a question. Unmute.
Yep, go ahead and unmute.
Unmute.
Let me see. I can push a button, ask to unmute. I don't know if that gives you something that helps. There we go.
There she
Okay.
goes.
Can you hear me now? Okay. You were asking a question about your own personal experiences, and I had the whole thing about the ESP, premonitions, all of that. Do you have your own experience with that?
I do. I really love that question. Nobody has asked me that.
Well,
Yeah.
it hit me hard throughout the book.
Yeah.
And so I wrote down different time periods, and I'm like, well, I wonder if it's her, you know,
Yeah.
you have that.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, all through my life, I have, and I think I say this with her relationship with her mother, right? And my mother would say to me, would ask me, okay, we're going to go do this, what's going to happen, you know? And I would be, and it still happens to me. I will be, not recently certainly, but I will be in a restaurant and I will say to myself, okay, in the next minute, somebody's going to drop, you know, a tray, and it happens, you know, and I, you know, there have been times in my life where I have felt, my mother and father are both deceased, but I have, you know, felt their presence. And, you know, so I kind of acknowledge that through, you know, like the scene at the cemetery. And it's something that I believe in ESP and clairvoyance. And I mean, I'm not a freak about it, but it, you know, it's just, you know, like part of my life. I mean, I can be watching, you know, a show on TV, and I know what they're going to say before they say it, and then they say it, and they say the exact words, and I don't know, you know, some people could say, well, you know, it's just that you're just tuned in to the topic or whatever, but sometimes it freaks me out because I can be spot on with something, you know, or before I turn on the radio, I know what song is going to be playing.
Yeah.
And it's there. So I like my life with that. It makes me interesting to myself.
Yeah, I agree.
That is really cool. I love that. I love that kind of stuff. I've never really been in tune with that, but I love hearing about it. It kind of gave me questions there when you were talking about all that stuff you've experienced. It's so neat. I love that a lot. That was a great question. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Yeah. And I tried not to overdo it, but there are, you know, there are certainly certain places where her mother's spirit shows up.
Mhm.
you know, like a door
Mhm.
slamming or
Yeah.
something. And I do carry it over into the second book, but in fact, there's a great chapter where her mom appears in her mind, obviously.
Right.
But it's, again, I tried not to overdo it, because that, you know.
Can I share with you guys one thing that happened with my mom?
Sure.
Definitely.
Okay. My mother passed away in 1986. I was living in Colorado. My sister was in New Jersey. And about a couple months after she passes away, I have a dream that my
Mhm.
mom called me and she gave me some sort of message. I don't remember what. The next morning, I called my sister and I said, I had the weirdest dream. And she goes, did mom call you?
Oh my
I'm like,
God. I
like,
have
Oh,
goosebumps.
wow. Yeah,
yeah.
me too. Oh,
And she
me
goes,
too.
mom called me last night too. And I'm like, what? So our mom called us. I don't know. I mean, I don't remember anything that she said, but we both got the same phone call that night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I know.
Oh, yes, cold chills. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
I
that.
love
I love
it.
that exists.
Thank you for Michelle. That's great.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's hard to follow up. That's so amazing. Like,
I
I'm like,
know.
oh,
That was
wait,
Yeah, I'm
there's
not
great.
like
even
other
gonna
questions.
start.
All of this is so cool. Oh my gosh. So let's jump into the ethical and moral dilemmas that come up.
Oh, okay.
Like when Cassie takes the money in the lockbox,
Mm.
do you
Mhm.
feel like she was stealing?
I
I
so
like
why don't we ask Mary, Lisa, and Michelle, was
what
she
do you guys
stealing?
think? That is cool. Yeah.
Ladies?
I will say something. I never would have taken it only because I there would be so many repercussions for taking it from unkindly people that I'd be afraid of it. I didn't know that it's there, but I don't think I would have taken it.
Okay. Who else?
Answer.
I don't know. I probably would have done the same thing she did, taken it and then, change my mind and put it back just for that same thing she said, the repercussions, and then the guilt would probably settle in with me. But I thought it was hysterical when, like, oh my God, she opens up the box and finds all the money, like she was entitled to it. So
Mary, did you have a reaction?
It's been a minute since I've read your book, and I'm kind of like, oh, I sort of remember that.
Yeah, no,
That wasn't really something that affected me that
yeah.
strongly for some reason. Yeah, I
Yes,
really
you
don't.
felt like she did what she did and it was okay with you. Like it didn't feel like a stealing, maybe. Like if it didn't affect you too
It
strongly.
didn't really seem like a incorrect. I mean, it's I guess because I've sometimes opened a box and gone, oops, okay. Well, there that is,
Yeah.
I
Well,
like
I think people have, so that's one thing that people do have a lot of like visceral reactions to. And last week, I mean, someone said to me they absolutely would not have taken it, or if they took it, they would have, kind of thrown it at Mike and made him explain what it was. And I said, well, he was in the hospital, so she probably wouldn't have done that. But I think that is a really good question for how people would have handled that whole situation, and that's good. I mean, it's good for discussion.
I agree.
it's
And I
coming
don't know
back
if
to me now.
Stephanie-
Yeah, I think I would have just confronted Mike at the hospital, going like, "Okay, what the heck?"
Yeah.
I'm a little bit noisy when when things like that happen to me.
But I think that was part of, and maybe it I didn't portray it clearly enough, is that the relationship that she had with Mike over the years. I mean, he was her college professor, and then, her lover, and then, she married him, and then everything went downhill. So, she wasn't comfortable always challenging him,
Right.
and someone said, well, how come, there's a box in his bureau that she didn't know about? Because she didn't go in there.
Right.
That was
Right.
off limits to her. And yeah, so, it's kind of like, it's a novel. It's a
Yes.
story. And so that's the way I wrote the story. And if there are some things when all the time when I write, I'm always asking my characters what if questions. What if you said this? What if you did that? What if you did the other thing? And clearly, as an author now, as I'm hearing feedback on what readers would have done in different situations in the story, they're all rational and relevant, but it would have been a different story.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that's just fine. But that was not my story. So
Yeah, I think one of the things that I spoke online with Heather during one of the discussions was that I think I had a little difficulty with the whole places and things and secrets idea between people who've been married, because my own spouse and I just don't do that. And I guess the way I raised my kids was like, if you can't reveal it, you shouldn't be doing it. And that's just kind of how we roll. So I was kind of like going, wow, I don't know if I could have dealt.
right.
Which I think
Yeah,
is
but
kind of cool for the story, the way it adds that drama. Like you
Oh, it does.
want to
Yeah.
kind of shake the characters, like, what are you doing? But it's kind of like you still want to keep reading, like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like reading your book completely smashed the moral compass I thought I had, because it made me feel like when you see their emotions and the things behind, you almost kind of feel like, okay, maybe you can do that. Like, you know what? It made me kind of put the book down sometimes, like, whoops, like, should I? Is that good? That's good. Okay. I love that about your book, though, because you see all that behind what they're feeling, what they came from. And it's kind of like, okay, this one, it wouldn't happen in my life, but I feel like in their life, it makes sense,
Right.
Yeah.
It may not happen to all of us, but it does happen where people just don't talk. And I mean, that communication was broken from the beginning. So
Yeah.
it just never developed for them. So that's how, it took, that's what was so, it is kind of funny, but it's sad, because it took her off, there it starts where he's, he's having an affair, he's got women or whatever. And then you turn around 2 chapters later or whatever, and well, so are you. So, it's just, I just thought it was great. I
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
I agree.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I love it. It also makes me think of the bad
too.
Cassie. She repressed bad Cassie a lot. She kept saying she was
Yes.
repressing it. Is there like a scene that you wish you could go back and replay out where she didn't repress bad Cassie? Like, is that something that you would have changed?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. But now I'm going to have to go back and think about it. And again, that's one of those techniques or elements that I wanted in there. And again, it was kind of a tribute to, I lived in Seattle for 10 years, and one of my best friends out there that I worked with used to call me Bad Mallory, because I had a reputation of challenging management, like or asking tough questions in town hall meetings and things. And so she would call me Bad Mallory. So I had to have Bad Cassie. And And she continues to show up in book 2.
That was my question. I
Yeah,
was going to ask
but
you
at,
that.
yeah, but at the right times, again, it's fun, writing the second book because, so much of the characters were developed. There's a new villain in book 2. I mean, it's a person that is in book 1, and I won't say who, but somebody becomes a villain in book 2. And so you can continue, some of the themes, but you have to, I learned, you have to bring in new stories,
Right. Yeah.
and so that's what I have to do in book 3.
So book 2 officially comes out on August 24th, I believe. Is that correct?
That is true. Yes, it is what's true.
I didn't realize there was a book 3.
Yeah, really. What's the
So
title
this
of
is
book 3?
my advanced reader's copy. And Heather, do you have yours?
I do. It's
Yeah, I sent Heather one.
and thank you
And
so much.
and it has a nice little seal on it because I've already gotten a 5-star review from Reader's Favorite. And I don't have the quote on top of this because it's the advanced one, but it's pretty.
No, absolutely.
Nice
That's the
cover.
first one.
I love your covers. I actually did have another member question that came in advance, and I'm
Oh.
not sure if you can answer it because I don't know if it's kind of revealing anything you have going on there. So if
Okay.
you can't, just let us know what you can tell us about the second
Okay.
as of now. But Sharon wanted to know if at the point in the book where Cassie got sick in the store, if you were trying to set her up to have a pregnancy.
That is a really good question because some people have mentioned that scene, and I'll tell you a little kind of side note. When I wrote that, I think you're probably all familiar with. I think it was a book, but it was also a movie called The Stepford Wives. You know that, and so in the first movie. So I live in Connecticut, and the first movie was actually filmed in Darien, Connecticut. And I know the grocery store that I think it was Catherine Ross was walking around with her carriage and everything. And so I envisioned that in my mind as I was writing that scene. And I knew when I wrote it that people would think that she was pregnant. But of course she was not. And I won't say whether or not she will be or whatever, but what was interesting was that early on, right after I released What's Not Said back in September, I received an email from a reader who lives in Nottingham, England, and she has a book club online called the Nomo Book Club. It's an international book club, and it is primarily for women who have been unable to conceive or have children. And so she had read What's Not Said, and she loved it. One of the prime reasons she loved it was because there was no miracle child, no miracle baby at the end. And so I just in May also I was their featured novel, and so what was a little challenge for me was I was ready to release the manuscript for What's Not True, and I was like, oh my gosh, I better read this and make sure I didn't want to say or do anything that was going to offend this very lovely book club, and it was fine. Yeah, I'm not going to say anymore.
I love that comes up again. Like you really take into account your readers. And I love that. I think that's so special because I know there's this line of like, getting out what you need to write and you feel like you want to get out there. And then to take into account who's reading it at the same time, that's a lot. And I think that's really special that you mix that together in such a wonderful way.
And I think I was just talking with another author the other day about this kind of, it's not a block, but it's kind of a barrier that I've set up as I'm writing the third book. And I think I obviously didn't have this when I was writing the manuscript for either of the first two books. I didn't have all the reader input. Now that I do, it's like there's another voice inside my head when I'm writing. It's kind of like, oh, well, if I say this, this person's not going to like it, or they're not going to. Oh, the one thing, I can't tell you the number of people that have said to me, either face to face or in their reviews, that they hate my characters because they're all flawed and they just don't like reading flawed characters. But they read the whole book. It's kind of like, so you didn't like my character, you hate my characters, but you read the whole book. And so I guess that's a question I have for you all. I mean, what is your reaction, not just to my stories, but how important are, whether a character or characters are flawed to your enjoyment or expectation of a novel?
I mean, if I could start, I think that flaws are kind of important to me when I read because they're more realistic. It's not kind of like this perfect, story. I feel like if there's no flaws, you don't really have much of a story. I think there's a flaw somewhere in every character. There's that moment where you're watching something where you kind of have to sit back and say, oh no, why'd you do that? Or else there'd be no story. Like, that's my opinion on it. But I don't know.
But you're right, because if the characters didn't have a flaw, there wouldn't be a story. We're not all perfect. I mean, that's what makes a book, whether it's, that type of flaw or something. It could be something entirely different, but there has to be some sort of flaw or problem or whatever. I mean, that's what the book is going to be based on. I mean, all the books it's kind of like when I had my first baby, my second daughter, I said to the pediatrician, why can't she be like the first one? Why can't they be all the same? He goes, because then people wouldn't have more than one. Why have another one? They're all different. He said, so you can't compare them. And he was true. Right. So we all have different things about us. So, and that's what would make the book.
I also believe that we read these books wanting to have flawed characters, and that we may not like them at all. I read psychological thrillers a lot, and there's quite a few I don't like the character, but I love the story, and the character needs to be that way.
You're like, it's like the juicier the better,
Right.
Come on, bring it out, because that's what, like you said, that's what makes the story. You look for that.
You flaws give characters depth. As everybody else has said, as a reader, I like reading flaws. As an author, that's usually what my stories are about, is flaws. But that's all I'm going to say on that one.
Yeah, good. Well, that makes me feel better.
Yes, I love what you've done with them. So flaws and all.
Absolutely.
Flaws and all.
So, I mean, you're talking about how that, you've got that reader voice in your head now. Is that the only difference you're finding writing book 1 to book 2 to book 3? Or has that differed a lot more even from book 1?
Hang on, got to step out a second. We have painters downstairs and I'm hearing things.
Oh dear.
So I'll be right back.
Go check on them.
You better check.
I think what's important for me is, because I was doing some writing over the weekend, was that I identified that as a problem, because the first several chapters that I've written, and I keep rereading them when I start writing again. They're really good, and I really like them. But then, I kind of sat down and I was hitting a wall, and I was saying, why is this happening to me? Because I hadn't really experienced it. And then I realized that I was, kind of, listening too much to what the readers are saying. So I have to not read reviews. I mean, I have lovely, absolutely fabulous reviews, and there are more of those than not. But I think it's the ones that are critical that stick in your mind, unfortunately. So they tell us, don't read reviews, don't read your reviews. But I think I have, with the third book, I want to, like the first book, there's the Venice scene, and yes, I've been to Venice a couple of times. And the second book, it's Paris related, and I've been to Paris, but I'd really like to go back. And in the third book, there's going to be Greece. There's going to be a Santorini scene, and I was there 2 years ago. So, but I need to kind of explode the third book more than I think it is. I think, again, there's going to be a different villain in the third book, and that may be enough, as I roll through the different scenes. But I'll probably have to have a few more people read it in order to really assess whether it, because sometimes I say the first book is the best, right, in a series. So far, people who've read the second book love the second book even more than they love the first book, and I think it's because of the characters. But I want the same reaction with the third. Okay, I'm not on this downward trajectory. I want it to keep building up, and it should, if you think about it, because hopefully my own writing is getting better.
Right.
Hopefully.
I think each time everybody writes, it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
And Michelle, were you starting to say something about reviews?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I think we think in our head, we worry about everybody else, what they're going to think. And I think we do that through our whole lives with whatever we're doing. And we got to get to a point where we can't please everybody.
Right.
So if we can just, like Valerie, I think what you're doing is great. And I would keep on whatever comes into your head out for you, not for everybody else.
That's right.
I love that.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
the
you.
reviews you're talking about too, like every time I've seen any of your reviews, they're all fantastic. So it's
Yeah,
probably
really
it's gotta be
good.
very few and far between the ones that are
Yeah.
not, up there with the 5 stars and
Right.
all that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'd say all feedback is good feedback though, because I think it's still triggered some kind of reaction in them to want to write something to you. So I still think that's pretty good, because I mean everything is it's art, your writing is art, so
Right,
everyone's going to interpret it differently.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have a name for the third book?
Yes. It will, so far, it will be What's Not Lost.
Okay.
So what's not said, what's not true, and what's not lost. I needed, obviously, to stay with the what's not, and then I needed a 4-letter word. But it's funny, it's not necessarily that I'm writing to it, but it's gonna fit. So I think I had like what's not over, and what's not over, what's not gone. And then I landed on what's not lost, and I was like, yeah, that can have multiple multiple meanings. So, which is what I wanted. So I think, Heather, you had mentioned something earlier about, a moral compass.
Yes.
My original title for What's Not Said was Immoral Authority, because, and I even have that phrase in the book, because I felt that she, and Annie actually talks to her about her, it was, she had the authority to make things right. And but my publisher said that it sounded too much like a thriller, and so they didn't like the title. So I worked on it for a number of days and came up with What's Not Said, because for obvious reasons. And then I was working on the second book, which I actually had a different title for. And I was like, scrub that. If it's going to be a series, then I want it to have the same What's Not Said, What's Not True, and then now What's Not Lost. So, and then that's going to be it for that series, I think.
I want to write some of the titles that you did end up with. I think that sounds perfect, and it's easy to keep up with the series and remember the titles, and it feels like it has a good flow. And that reminds me too, I wanted to ask, I know how you say you like to kind of bury clues and questions and answers and stuff in your writing. And I noticed, and I may be way in left field here, but you mentioned vampires a couple of times. Are you thinking of doing, like, are you burying any other clues? Yeah, you said stuff like, when they were talking about his nutritional recommendations, the garlic and it'll keep the vampires away. There were just a couple little hints, and I'm like, am I looking too hard? Are there hints for other books that you want to write written in there anywhere?
No.
Oh, okay. It was funny. I'm like, I can't see her writing a vampire book, but maybe she wants to. I don't know why that struck me, but
no. But it's funny you should say that, because I think maybe too, Michelle had said something about characters, or the other books, is that I do want to then switch over to write cozy mysteries. And I was thinking, and I haven't thought it through clearly, but in the third book, expanding, or having a character in that book that is going to end up being a main character in the cozy mystery. So Michelle, you were the one, like kind of like a spin-off. Were you the one that said that? Yeah. So I might do that, so which would be kind of tricky, but I think it might be interesting to see if I can do that.
That would be awesome.
It's fun. I've done that myself.
You've done that yourself?
Yeah, the spin-offs.
Yeah.
That's well, this interview is about you, not me, but maybe one day I'll tell everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you too, talking about like your writing going forward. You are in an admin in the Pros and Pandemic Facebook page, and you recently, a little while back, you had this poll up that I found very interesting, and I didn't see the end results. But you're kind of asking people's preference on, scenes that are a little bit R-rated versus, like Hallmark behind closed doors. So I was wondering, what were the results of that? And is that something that is also impacting your writing going forward, of what you're thinking of as you write?
Yeah. So I had watched a webinar a month ago, and there was a woman on there from Hallmark who, buys, their books, their authors, and then she works with their film division. And I obviously I don't watch Hallmark movies, can tell by my writing, but it was very interesting to me to learn that for a Hallmark book, there cannot be any sex in it at all. And I mean, the main characters, they can't even kiss. They can't even know that sex is a thing. Okay. So I was like, oh, well, I'll never submit to Hallmark then, right? So Heather, so the poll, I remember the poll, and I think it was probably, I did it because of that webinar that I watched. And I think most people felt, at least the people that responded, was that they like a little heat in their stories. It's life. And I have a good friend of mine, when she read the book and we were in a book club, she started out the session by saying she she didn't know that I even thought of things like I wrote about. and I kind of laughed because I actually toned it down after working on revisions, and I went back, I cleaned up some of the language and only have swear words where I really want them to be, not just gratuitously. And the sex scenes, I kind of like tried to pull them back a little bit and leave something for the imagination. And yet since then, and there's some sex in the second book, but I don't think as much as the first one. But since I read constantly, right? And I mean, my sex scenes are nothing. I just finished a book this morning that had one chapter that was like really over the top, I think. And I thought, I would have never written what this author wrote because it's not in my psyche to write it. But yeah, I think a little heat is real. So
yeah, like the flaws, it's real life.
Yeah,
makes it more realistic.
Yeah.
I also saw online recently you launched a newsletter called, was it Behind and Ahead?
Ahead,
tell us
right.
more about that and how we can sign up?
Yeah, so you can go to ValerieTaylorAuthor.com and there's a subscribe button, and I think you just fill in a couple of things and then it'll go to my MailChimp. And I only put out one so far because it's a whole learning thing, how to work with this app and everything. But it's obviously, they say that in order to be a successful author, you need to have a huge email list. And I don't have a huge one. I have just under 100 people. Mary's shaking her head.
Drama making one and tech.
It's hard. It's and I don't have money to hire people to do it for me. So I decided that, and since I'm a writer and I worked as a writer in business for years, writing the newsletter is not the problem. It's the technology of it. Okay. Exactly. So, so the whole thing with Behind and Ahead is that I wanted to give my subscribers some interesting tidbits about, I said in the first one, I said, there's like 200 countries in the world. I didn't know that there are 200 countries in the world, and I started with Italy, but I thought that I would, choose a country and then find out something interesting about an author or a book or something literary about that country and put that in there. And then, so with the first newsletter with Italy, I found out that Pinocchio is one of the most popular books in the entire world ever. And so I had a little bit about Pinocchio. And then a little from behind, kind of a little tidbit about me. And then going ahead, because I do book reviews, maybe I put in a book review. Certainly there was something about my books, but it's more about giving my subscribers something more than my books. So always something about my books, but that's not the central core. And in it, I ask people questions, but not that anyone yet is, responding, but we'll see how it goes. And I don't want to bombard people with it. So it'll be like I did one in May. I'll probably try to get one out by July 4th. And then maybe, well, certainly right before August 24th. So probably 2 more this summer.
That's great. It sounds really well-rounded, like some really fun information. So I'm definitely
I hope so.
Sign up for that.
Something different.
Yeah.
Something different.
And what other ways can our book club members support you?
I have a list. No. And speaking of lists, before we go down that path, because I don't want to keep people much longer, can I just speak a moment about what's not true? And then I can segue, because it does segue. So my book has, the chapters in my book have titles, right? And people have said they like that the book has titles. But then someone said to me, you should have the chapter list at the beginning of the book, because when they're reading, they want to go back, they want to, if there's a chapter list. So at the beginning of What's Not True, I do have a list of chapters, and I say a list of chapters in honor of Cassie, because she loves her lists, right? So that's what I did with that. So that's what's new. And that there's still a Spotify list in the back and the book club discussion.
That was great.
Yeah, thank you. So to that end, I think many of your members, Heather, who've read the book have already posted a review. And so those of you who are, kind of watching afterwards and everything, posting a review is really great. And telling your friends and family. And I see, some of my posts being shared on other book sites from your members. So I really appreciate that. For What's Not True, because I think obviously you all read What's Not Said, but if you go on to Goodreads and you mark What's Not True as want to read, I think that helps algorithms. And if you go on to BookBub and follow me, and then I think we talked about book clubs and subscribing to my newsletter, but also ask your library. Libraries buy books all the time. And I'm already, I believe, in over 45 libraries worldwide, Singapore, New Zealand, but I'd like more US libraries as well. There's like 10,000 libraries in the United States. So even if you've read the book, if you ask them to order either one of them, they will usually. So that's what can be done. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and I love that. That's all really great ideas. And I know that you kind of have your marketing background too. So has that helped you with this? And what would you give for advice too to help with other authors? Because right now everyone's struggling still, even though the pandemic is lifting.
So like I said, I wrote down, what people could do to help. And it's because I usually forget to say. So lists are very important. And I think as a marketer, I have a marketing plan, and I set it up for What's Not Said, and I followed, must have found something online where some expert says, 6 months before you do this, 4 months before you do that. And so I did a marketing plan in that framework for What's Not Said. And I didn't do everything that was in the plan. And some things that I did, and I won't say which things, but a couple of things that I did that I paid good money for, didn't people are trying to separate authors, especially new authors, from their money. And, they promise all this exposure, and then it doesn't happen. And so things that I did that didn't work out, I'm not going to do this time. And but I feel that I have more fans, if you will, certainly than I did a year ago. And so I'm hoping that all of you now become my street team, and that you can
Absolutely.
share and and I just love talking with you guys, and I do more of this. So I think writing things down and having a plan and following your plan, but being flexible enough to be able to react to new opportunities that come along. I'll give you an example. Book one, I got a very nice review from Kirkus. So I'm being very honest here, okay? Got a really nice review from Kirkus. It's on the front cover. I can promote that. What's Not True, I got a crappy review from Kirkus. I opened it up on my email a month ago and immediately knew I was in big trouble, because the reviewer had a line, their first line had the wrong protagonist. Okay. Yeah. And so then the whole rest of the review was just awful. And so I didn't, and I paid for that review, but I'm not using it. Okay. But at the same time, I had 3 reviewers from Reader's Favorite that each gave me a 5-star review. They wrote really well thought out reviews. And so I knew it wasn't me. I mean, the people are, and these are people that didn't necessarily read book one. Okay. So I get an email from Kirkus that they've got some program and they want to promote What's Not Said, my first book. And would I call them for a 20-minute discussion as to how they could promote my book and the pricing behind it? Well, I don't want to call them, because, if I call them, I'm just going to be mean. So we can write a book called What's Not Mean, right? Because I would say to them, your reviewer did not get my book, and thus I cannot, even though there may have been a line or two that was okay, I wouldn't want, you have to publish the whole review.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not going to risk that. So I don't know if that's too much information, but
I think that's great information, because it's definitely like it stinks that you went through that. But I appreciate you sharing that so that other people know it's really kind of a trial and error game, I guess.
yeah.
You never know what'll pan out, and you just got to do your
Right.
best.
Right.
I think you're on to something with the book clubs and the way you do things and work with libraries. I think that's huge for getting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And I did want to ask you too, please keep posting in our book club. Let us know.
Good.
We want to know what you're up to, when things are releasing, and how we can keep following you. And I know you wanted to do some drawing and giveaway information too. Did you want to get into that now?
Yes, absolutely, before we sign off. So obviously Heather had me featured in May, and then your unfortunate family situation. So we fell over into June, and I don't have control over a lot of things, as we all know we don't in our life. But as it turned out, What's Not Said on Amazon and other sites on the ebook was reduced to 99 cents beginning June 1. And I felt terrible about that. I thought, oh my gosh, these people in Heather's book club, they're buying the book at full price. And then, they're going to say, gee, if I knew it was only going to be 99 cents, I wouldn't have paid full price for it, right? So everyone, and I have a list of about 10 people, all of you obviously here. When I don't have I only have like one arc left, but when What's Not True publishes in August, I'm going to send each of you a print book of that. So if you have
Thank
a
you.
pen, you're very welcome. My email is valmtaylor@gmail.com. And if you just send me your address, I will, I'm very good about these things. I will be sure that I send you What's Not True.
Aw.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
it's not really a drawing because I'm doing it for, certainly all of you on here. And then I have a list of, and I'll coordinate with Heather because I don't want to miss anyone. And then, we'll just, whenever there's a slot open, I know Heather's got a whole list of authors she's going to be featuring over the next months, but maybe as we fall into the winter, there's a slot open, and I'd love to come back and talk about What's Not True.
I love it.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about
Yeah, me
that too
too.
because I want to keep up with everybody. And I know I actually
One
have
moment.
waiting lists and then waiting list on top of the waiting list, which is
Right,
fantastic.
right.
Actually, Mary here is on our upcoming reads list too. So,
Well, maybe we could do it as not as a whole month type of thing again, but we could do some kind of a combination takeover set and do a session. I mean, we don't have
I've been
to
thinking
do a
about doing
month
like a
long.
follow-up interview with people, like
Yeah,
start going back
yeah.
from, Stephen and
Yeah.
work my way back through and see how everybody's doing. I've been thinking about that. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that it sounds like something that people are wanting and that you want to do.
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah.
And we
So
can
are there any other questions that you all have?
Not really.
No, me either.
Just
I
enjoy
love
having you
seeing-
and meeting you and seeing
Oh,
you.
thank you. I loved seeing all of your comments over the last 6 weeks. And I think, I see you also on some of the other book sites, which is, it becomes very, I've learned of almost like a close-knit community of authors and readers. And when I've done takeovers on the other sites, I actually keep a list of everyone who comments, and I try to comment on almost everything, and you never can. But I see some of the same names, popping up, and it's much fun. So
I'm fairly new to all this. Actually, Elaine,
oh
who
yeah.
made it, really has
Mhm.
helped me get more involved and get into learning about authors and whatever. So, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
lot
Elaine
of
has
fun.
been a big supporter of mine.
Yes, Elaine's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. So that's
She is
great.
great. This is wonderful. I love this. I love that we all get to connect, and this has been amazing. I love your book, and I can't wait
Oh,
to
thank you.
Me too.
Thank you, everyone.
Me too.
and see
All
more
right.
of what you've got coming.
Yes.
That would.
Well, thank you very much, Heather,
Yes,
and all of you.
and thank you guys for
showing
coming.
up.
It's been so
Yeah.
fun.
Okay, I'll see you online.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everybody.
You
You
too.
too.
Okay.